So, good evening, everyone, and welcome again. Thank you for joining us for the third webinar in our series, The Arts of Eastern Europe and Eurasia, which is designed to support educators in bringing the rich artistic traditions of Russia, Eastern Europe, and Eurasia into their classrooms. So, most of you know me. My name is Sandra, and I'm the Education Outreach Administrator for the Davis Center at Harvard University. This series, The Arts of Eastern Europe and Eurasia, is designed specifically for educators looking to bring the rich, diverse, and vibrant artistic traditions of Russia, Eastern Europe, and Eurasia into their classrooms. So this webinar series is a collaborative initiative between 8 different institutions. And rather than, again, each time naming all the centers, I'll just name the universities: Harvard University, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Pittsburgh, University of Kansas, the Ohio State University, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Indiana University, and University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So I just want to also remind you, for those of you who are attending the series or each of the webinars in the series, each of these 6 90-minute webinars will focus on a different art form. And we encourage you to register for any or all of the upcoming sessions. While the webinars are designed as part of a series, you are welcome to attend as many or as few as you'd like. And educators who attend all 6 sessions will be eligible to receive 10 professional development points or contact hours. So please make sure, if you're doing that, to have your real name displayed on Zoom so we can track your attendance and issue your participation points at the end of the series. And with this, I'll turn over the introduction of our speaker, Danielle, over to Rachel, because they are from the same institution. And Rachel will tell you much more about Danielle. And I do want to say one more thing. This whole series started because of Danielle. I'm going to say that because we met about a year ago, and I found out that she was a musicologist, and at that time she was an outreach coordinator. And I said, wouldn't it be great we do something with arts? And Danielle was, yes, let's do it. And this is how it got started. So welcome, Danielle, and welcome everyone. And Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rachel, and I work at the Russian East European Eurasian Center at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And today we are honored to be joined by our colleague, Danielle Sekel. Danielle has over a decade of experience in the education sector. She has a background in program coordination, community outreach, and interdisciplinary curriculum development. She most recently served as our outreach and programming coordinator at the Russian East European Eurasian Center. At the center, she managed grant funding, programming, and public engagement initiatives. Danielle holds a bachelor's degree in literary studies and music from Roanoke College and a master's degree in musicology from the University of Illinois. She is currently pursuing her PhD in musicology. So please join me in welcoming Danielle to our session tonight.
Thank you, Sandra and Rachel, for such a lovely introduction. This may have been a seed planted by me, but you all did the important work behind the scenes of making it happen. So I really do appreciate it. And I'm really glad to be here. So let's see if hold on, enter notes. We'll get this shared and we'll get this show on the road. All right, you should be able to see my screen. Yes, great. All right, so thank you again for the warm introduction and the welcome. I'm really glad to be here and to see you all. Thank you for joining me tonight in your evening hours. I apologize in advance. I have a bit of a cold and I've been talking all day already, so bear with me. And I'm looking forward to the conversations we'll have over the next hour and a half or so. So I'd like to start by giving you just a little bit of background on myself. As you heard from Rachel, I am currently a project coordinator here at the University of Illinois, but I'm also working on a PhD in musicology. Before I came to Illinois, I was a middle and high school teacher. I taught music and English in South Carolina. And throughout my time at Illinois, I've worked closely with the Russian, East European, and Eurasian Center here on their K through 12 initiatives and their community outreach initiatives. And over the past decade or so, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how educators like yourselves might come to use musical traditions from this part of the world in your own classrooms. In case you're interested, my doctoral research looks at, broadly speaking, how music functions as a form of lived heritage in post-industrial northeastern Pennsylvania, so coal country, showing how communities use sound to remember, reinterpret, and sustain their ethnic identities from Slavic American communities, so mostly Polish and Slovak, and their industrial identities after the coal mines have largely closed down. So you can see, I've done a lot of outreach with Reese, but I also have done a lot of field work in Northeast Pennsylvania around mostly polka bands that sing about coal and Polish American heritage, which I will reference later. So thank you for indulging me. So before we get started, I would really like to get a sense of who's here today. If you don't mind to just drop in the chat where you're joining from and what you teach, so we can see kind of the disparate ends that we're all joining together from as we move ahead. I know from the registration you are all teaching all different age groups and all different areas of your field. A Spanish teacher, an international club advisor. It's okay if you're just interested in the subject, you've come to the right place. Fantastic. You can keep those coming while I continue to yap. So before we dive any deeper, I do want to just give you an overview of what we'll be exploring today. So of course, we'll be exploring several musical examples from across the region. As you can see from this map, the region is, as it were, huge. When we say Eastern Europe and Eurasia, we're talking about an area that stretches from the Baltics to the Balkans, from the Caucasus, all the way into Central Asia. It includes dozens of languages, hundreds of local traditions, countless musical practices that have been shaped by any number of topics that we could discuss in our classrooms, right? Migration, empire, trade routes, religious diversity, even physical landscapes that are wildly different throughout this region. So all that to say, many of the musical examples that I'm sharing today reflect the parts of the region that I'm most familiar with through my own training, my own research, my own musical practice and outreach experience. Perhaps it goes without saying that they're not the only traditions in the region. So think of what I'm sharing today as entry points of sorts, right? The goal for me isn't to be exhaustive. We would be here a lot longer than 90 minutes if that were the goal. But rather it's to give you some practical, teachable examples that hopefully you can adapt to fit your classrooms. And so we'll go through many different adaptable classroom activities. I have several examples for early elementary, middle school, high school for you to ponder and think about how that might fit into your own educational environments. I think you'll see a lot of cross-curricular connections between different areas of study. I'll go through a few digital educator resources that may be of use to you, and I hope to have some robust conversation at the end as well. So if you have questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat. If it makes sense for the flow, we can address them as they come up, and if not, I will revisit them at the very end. But ultimately, my goal is that you will leave here with some activities or even just morsels of ideas that you could implement in your own classroom. So all that to say, I was once a music teacher, and I think that it would be a great idea for us to warm our ears up and to engage a little with the sounds that you might experience when talking about music in this part of the world. So I'm going to play this short clip, and all I really want you to do is to notice whatever jumps out at you, right? Nothing formal, nothing technical, but just listen and let yourself respond. So while you're listening, think about like what stands out first to you? The voices, the rhythm, the energy. How would you describe it? Does it remind you of anything? What does it remind you of? What questions does it raise for you? And as you listen, I'll let it play for a little bit. Just drop a few of your impressions in the chat. I mean, single words work, emojis work, whatever works, right? It's totally low stakes, totally exploratory. Just giving our ears a chance to chew on something auditory before we dive into the bigger ideas. So hopefully the sound works. Sandra, I'll look at you, and if you look like something's wrong, I'll know it's not working. But here we go. Two verses of it. I love your observations. Some people have connected it to a specific place, right? Home or the Balkans or anything adjacent to that. It's very upbeat, it's very joyful, it's very fun. Perhaps it sounds like something you could dance to, right? Someone commented on the percussion, right? That driving force makes it feel like you want to move your body to it. I like this. Sounds like a mixture of Celtic and Middle Eastern music. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, music's everywhere, right? So we have a lot of different traditions that are in conversation with one another. The traditional clothing, of course, it adds to it. And also just the natural surroundings of where they are, right? It's very embedded in a specific homeland, right? So thank you for humoring me there. This is a very festive Bulgarian traditional piece. Maybe you recognize some of the instruments and maybe you didn't recognize some of the other ones, which is also a fun thing to think about when you're looking at these examples. So when we think about why we're interested in bringing music into our classrooms, I might be a little biased since I am a musicologist and I've been training in music for most of my life, but I really do think that music is one of the most powerful ways that communities carry their heritage and their practices forward intergenerationally, right? When we talk about this idea of having an intangible cultural heritage, which I know has been brought up in previous workshops in this series, like this is exactly what we're talking about, right? We have so many examples around the world of these intergenerational living traditions and practices that families and communities themselves pass down in everyday life. And I think what's so great for educators, right, no matter where you're approaching this from as a K through 12 or K through 14 educator, or beyond, right? We're all lifelong learners here. Is that music gives students an emotional and a sensory entry point into cultures that they may not know, right? It helps them connect with thinking about who people are and what they value in their society and their lives and how they experience the world. And when I think about using music as an educational tool, I think that it's a great vehicle or a vessel of sorts for structuring and driving forward conversations and discoveries about things like identity and memory and ritual. I mean, movement, migration, all of these things. I mean, music can be at the heart of those conversations. And when I think about music in Eastern Europe and Eurasia, across the whole region, music's woven into every corner of life, right? You can think about, for example, an Armenian lullaby that's sung to babies for generations, or Bulgarian men dressed as kukuris, right? These mummers here who are dancing to bring in good luck. Yes, sometimes playing a musical video on YouTube is the only way to get students to stop talking and to tune in too. This is a photo I took when I was in Bulgaria many years ago of a Balkan brass band playing during a wedding. And they literally guide people attending the wedding from one ritual moment to the next. Even mourning and lament has a sound in this region where we have distinct lamenting traditions and lamentation songs that are found throughout the region. We even have traditions like Tuvan throat singing, where the vocalizations imitate the literal landscape in which these people live, right? Vocalizations that imitate wind and water and horses galloping across the steppe. So the point here, as I ramble on, isn't to memorize all of these traditions, right? It's to show that music carries memory, it holds identity, it propels ritual, it encapsulates politics, it embodies place. It crosses into geography, history, literature, religion. I mean, even STEM, right? We could do a STEM-based class on music in this region. And I feel like through my conversations with many educators that people sometimes are timid or afraid to broach music in a classroom setting because they don't know music. But I think we all know music, right? We have all engaged with it in our lives, and we all have things that we notice and observe when we listen to it, which we just proved in our listening example. You all had fabulous observations. And there are really just so many ways to tie it into your classroom. So I'd like to walk you through two different examples to warm you up even more to engaging with musics from this region before we go into more specific focused examples that you might use in your classroom. So the first listening example I have here are two very short Bulgarian women's vocal pieces. It'll be a little different than what you just heard, right? But I want you to, as you listen, think about what you notice, what you hear, maybe how it makes you feel. See if you can identify the melody line, right? After a while, can you kind of hum along? It's quite possible, right, that you can. So here's the first one. It's called Dekayana Prominala.
Dekayana prominala, dekayana prominala, shaj ne došaj, shaj mi daj mi žolta ruža, mak male mak. Černo seme posejala, šaj ne došaj, šaj mi daj mi žolta ruža, mak male mak. Zeleno je poniknalo, šaj ne došaj, šaj mi daj mi žolta pupilo, sinjo belo na pupilo, šaj ne došaj. Šaj mi daj mi žolta ruža, mak male mak. Halenoje rasavtelo, halenoje rasavtelo, šaj ne došaj. Šaj mi daj mi žolta ruža, mak male mak.
So that's the first example. I love your observations in the chat. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Yes, this is a song about a young woman walking through a forest, right? What about the sound, the quality of the sound? It's quite different than what we think of when we expect Western art music, right? It is a cappella, there are no instruments. Could you kind of hum along after a while? It's very repetitive, right? Very short fragments that repeat over and over again. Yes, exactly. How they sing in their chests, right? The sound is not up in their heads, but it's a very earthy sound. It's very rooted in the earth, like you're planted firmly on the ground. It is simple, but there's a lot that goes into it, right? Harmonious, but still discordant, right? There's a lot of crunchy sounds that aren't necessarily pleasant to the ear, perhaps. I'll play one more for you. They're short, and I like them. I hope you like them too.
Netigi samome, netigi sakam, netigi samome, drasigi za tebe. Da li bjelu lice njamam, tamana mi najdeš, da li bjelu lice njamam, tamana mi najdeš. De ludu, ludu bre, ludu poludelo, de ludu, ludu bre, druga zaljubilo. Tvoj tu bjelu lice mome, tigana mesečina, tvoj tu bjelu lice mome, tigana mesečina. Ne tigu iskam mome, ne tigu sakam, ne tigu iskam mome, drži go za tebe. Da li tanka snaga njamam, tamana mi najdeš, da li tanka snaga njamam, tamana mi najdeš. De ludu, ludu bre, ludu poludelo, de ludu, ludu bre, druga zaljubilo. Tvojta tanka snaga mome, bačva zatrušija, tvojta tanka snaga mome, bačva zatrušija. Ne ti ja iskam mome, ne ti ja sakam, ne ti ja iskam mome, drži ja za tebe.
A lot of great observations again. Shannon, thanks for pointing out that there's a drone. Perhaps you could hear that we do have people singing a melody line, right? But then there's people also underneath going, right, on the very same note the whole time, right? That's very typical of this vocal style. And I found that you can usually lead any number of students of any age to finding that drone and trying to hold it while all of these discordant sounds happen above it. It's actually quite fun. And I think, you know, Bulgarian women's village singing, this style of vocal singing has become one of the most easily recognizable Eastern European vocal traditions, right? It became very popular in the 70s and 80s. They did all these talk shows in the United States. So, you know, people have usually heard these songs. And a lot of the texts tell a story, right? This one sounds very haunting and serious, but it's actually quite funny. It's telling a story of a young girl who's trying to get the attention of a potential suitor, and he's not exactly interested in her, right? So at the beginning, she's like, "Well, don't I have dark eyes? Aren't you interested in my dark eyes?" And in the next verse, the women are still singing in the voice of the suitor, and he says, "Your dark eyes are as big as plates, as saucers. I don't want them. Keep them for yourself." At the very end, she says, "Well, don't I have a slender waist? Aren't you interested in my slender waist?" And he replies, your body is basically like a pickle barrel, right?" So they're very funny songs as well that tell a story oftentimes. And I find that they're very accessible for students to listen to as examples and to make observations while they're listening, right? So they can identify different musical textures, right? Perhaps they can hear that drone at the bottom. They can try to hold on to it. They can think about the different story elements that are happening in it. They can identify the tone or the timbre of the sound that they're making with their voices. That's a little more technical, but I think students are quite interested in this sort of thing. And they could learn some new insults as well. All right, so for the second one, something completely different, right? We're going to jump all the way to southern Siberia, to the Republic of Tuva. What you are about to hear might be totally new to you, or it might be something you've encountered on like NPR at 2 a.m. I'm not sure. Either way, I invite you to let it hit your ears without overthinking it too much. I'd be interested for your immediate reactions or responses to the first example that I'll play a short snippet of in the interest of time. I love all of your observations. I think small children, I don't think that small children would like this music. I know they would, because I've done story times with them where we've incorporated this into the lesson, and they really get into it. It's so rhythmic and energizing that they really begin to feel the beat and the pulse of it. Almost a horse-like movement. It's funny you mentioned this, because that's absolutely what they're going for, right? A lot of these traditions are tied directly to the landscape, right? So they'll imitate the wind, they'll imitate running water, the sounds of insects buzzing, horses galloping across the steppe. And the landscape is just baked into that vocal technique. So you'll hear that they're able to actually produce multiple pitches. Yeah, I can drop the link in the chat with my YouTube ads. And I can share a link to all of these after the fact as well to those in attendance. So don't fret. So you'll hear that the singer, right, will have this almost growling low drone underneath, and then there's these shimmering overtones floating on top. It's a very impressive singing technique. I wish I could do it. But it's also so intensely linked to the landscape, right? So you might consider what the landscape might look like and how that's reflected back in the music. So I like this particular example here because he's out in the steppe singing, and there are plenty of horses around. So I won't play the whole thing, but just a little. I hope that he knows exactly how cool he is, because it's just so amazing, right? But you can almost picture a horse that's from this second video running through the fields of what they were singing in the first song, right? I think that it's such an effective sonic auditory experience of what the landscape looks like, which is very cool. Yes, it's almost like when you would talk into a fan as a child. So now that our ears are, I think, adequately warmed up, I'd like to shift us from experiencing the music to thinking about how we might actually bring it into the classroom. One of the greatest things I think about working with sound is that it's really incredibly flexible, right? So you can take the exact same musical example and pull out totally different learning goals depending on what you teach. So for instance, rhythm is an easy bridge into pattern recognition. That's great for our early learners. A narrative ballad or a lullaby could be used as a springboard for talking about character or plot or theme or symbolism in an ELA classroom. A wedding song easily opens up conversations about community roles and tradition and ritual and social studies. When we listen to a lament, right, we're actually listening to a primary source, right? Someone's emotional and cultural response to grief or war or memory. When we hear throat singing, right, we're immediately immersed in this world of acoustics and overtones that are attached to a literal landscape. So my point ultimately is that you don't need to teach music to teach with music, right? It can find its way into your classrooms, even if you're not a music or an arts teacher. These clips, I think, all these examples, they function like texts, right? So students can hear them, they can feel them, they can interpret them, they can describe them, they can compare them. So as we move forward with some of the actual examples of how to use these sorts of things in your classrooms, I invite you to think about where these ideas sort of slot themselves naturally into what you already teach, right? It's sort of like a big menu, and you can take the pieces that work for your subject and your grade level and adapt them to work as best as possible for what you're trying to do. Are we learning how to do overtone singing in the chat? We all want to go home and learn how to do it. Me too. We can do another workshop maybe. So for elementary students, one thing that I really like to do is to play with rhythm. This is a very popular traditional Romanian and Moldovan folk dance that I've often played for students just to get them to kind of play along with a rhythm, with a beat, to figure out how they can engage and interact with it. So I'll play a little bit of it for you so you can hear it, but often with students, I would try to get them to clap along to the beat, right? To try to feel the beat. This song is very fun because it gets faster progressively as it goes on. So it's fun to watch students slowly pick up on the fact that it's getting faster and faster. With little littles, I like to try to get them to march in time with the song. And we have even been so brave as to attempt like a simple line or circle dance, just with very simple footwork, just to get them moving in time with the piece. This is from an outreach event that we did for an after-school program here in Champaign with elementary and middle schoolers. So a very mixed bag, and they did really well, actually. I was skeptical at first, but they really got into it. So here I'll play just a little bit of it, and then I'll fast forward so you can hear that it's getting faster and faster towards the end.
Moldova, Romania.
So this feels like a comfortable tempo, like you could keep this up for a while, right? But and so on and so forth, right? So you can imagine that by the end, you're quite tired, actually. I don't know if anyone here has ever done traditional dancing in the region, but it's a workout, right? So if you have some students who need to burn some energy, right? I think that this is a pretty effective way to get them to engage with these sorts of rhythms, these increasing tempos, to get them even to just sway in time, right? Someone mentioned a few examples ago that often people will like clap or drum or pat their legs along with this, or move in time with the music, even if it's just swaying back and forth in your seat and then advancing to marching in place and then advancing to stepping in time in a circle. I've even done this with Head Start students who are 3 to 5 years old, and they're able to more or less do it. They actually begin to work as a team together, which is really fun. So you might be skeptical, but you might be surprised. Another activity that I've done with elementary school students is this sort of idea of playing around with sound and story, right? So I've used examples from Armenia that has a very storied tradition of lullabies, right? And so I would, for example, play an Armenian lullaby, maybe explain to them the story that's being told in the lullaby. So this specific one tells about how Well, it's a sweet little lullaby about how the tree is your cradle, the moon is your mother, the sun is your father, and the deer will provide for you, right? So you're out in the forests, and it's very similar to a Western lullaby, as you might imagine. And so, after you've riled them up with the increasingly fast song, you can play a lullaby to get them to calm down. I'll play just a little bit to give you an idea of this sonic world. It's all quite different, right? But as you're explaining this to students, you might have them, draw a character or a scene, or just draw what it makes them feel, right? Or to invite them to tell their own lullaby story based on what they've taken from this example. And it goes on and on. It's quite lovely, right? I do find that students get very interested in how the stories are told, maybe what the imagery is like, right? When I've done this before, I've had many students who have drawn literal forests or trees or the sun or the moon, and they've envisioned themselves within that space, which is quite special, I think. They are able to place themselves in that sonic world. And it's quite interesting, right? So this is another one. You can even do it with not lullabies necessarily, but you could bring in other examples that tie specifically to a sound and a place and tell a story as well. Let's see. Another fun one that I've done with my elementary school students is diving into the world of call and response, right? So this is found throughout the region. This is a particularly well-known example from the Republic of Georgia. It's a call and response song. As I play this for students, I try to get them to identify the different groups that are singing and to see if they can hear, group 1, group 2, or sometimes even just to tune their ears in to try to hear the short phrases that are repeating over and over again, right? The nice thing about a call and response song is that you're supposed to be able to learn it pretty quickly, right? That's the point of it. So for this one, I've often had them just learn a short phrase and then try to catch it every time it repeats. And by the end, they can usually feel when it's going to come back, and they'll be participating in the call and the response by the end. So just to help you hear it a little better, I've put the words up, the transliteration of the lyrics, so you can follow along. Even if you don't know Russian or Georgian, excuse me, you can hear it repeating over and over again throughout the video. actually pick up on this quite quickly, I find. After listening to it, for about maybe 5 minutes, they're able to really engage with it and get into actually trying to pick apart all of the pieces that are repeating over and over again. One thing that I've done before with elementary school students is to challenge them to come up with their own call and response song, right? We've done this as a group, and with the littles, like in Head Start, like 3 to 5-year-olds, they would be interested in learning that these are usually pieces that are used to help people who are working together, right? So they're songs that are used out in the fields when you're working, or trying to accomplish some common goal, right? So we've had them come up with their own classroom cleanup call and response song or something of this nature. And that's something that I've actually done, and it's been a lot of fun to have the students involved in crafting this sort of call and response after giving them sort of a look into what call and response might sound like in this region of the world. So moving on to middle school, and I think what you'll see is that a lot of these can either be, parsed down a little or built up depending on what age range you're working with, right? So I'm not saying that only elementary school students could do what we just discussed, right? I think that they would work just as well in a high school classroom setting with the right framework, right? So one thing that I've found really fun with middle schoolers is to challenge them to map the music, right? To think about what they're hearing. Maybe there's a visual component as well, and to ask them to guess where they think it's from, right? And to explain their reasoning behind it. So you'd be surprised that they've been taking in media for many years, and they've experienced things, and they have thoughts and conceptions, and perhaps they're not all correct, but it leads to very interesting conversation. This is one that I've shown middle schoolers before, and they've had really interesting thoughts to share. So I'll play just a little bit of it because it has a nice breadth of instruments in it. You might also recognize that we have a drone that's come back, but now it's in instrumental music, not just vocal music, right? Sandra says Macedonian. It's Bulgarian, but it has a lot of Macedonian undertones to it, yes. So actually, when I first played this for middle schoolers, they actually thought that it was from Turkey. And I think that's because of the zurna, that's the instrument that's playing right at the very beginning, does have a lot of those Ottoman sounds to it, right? So it was actually very interesting to hear a group of 12 and 13-year-olds make that sort of connection based on things that they've seen on TV and YouTube. So we actually had a lot of very interesting conversations come out of that. And you can imagine if you've already introduced them to vocal music, there are a lot of similarities in the instrumental music that carry through as well. And so they can make those sorts of connections also. One of my favorites is talking about music and migration. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the accordion as an instrument and how it's moved across this world. So perhaps you would think of the accordion as a global traveler, right? It's almost the perfect case study for thinking about music and migration because it's compact and it's portable. It's adopted by many groups and it adapts easily to new musical styles as people move around the world. And it really does a lot of, I also played the accordion in one of my previous lives, occasionally in this one too. And it's really a very versatile instrument, right? So you can really make a very large, impressive sound with it, and it could be a band in and of itself in many ways. So one activity that I'd love to do with middle schoolers is to map the accordion's journey, right? A lot of aspiring accordionists, we should start a band. That would be fun. So an illustration of thinking about the accordion's journey, right, might be to start with, for example, a popular traditional Polish and Ukrainian tune that is often played on the accordion. So here's an example of something that you would hear back in Poland, in Ukraine, on a traditional button accordion, just to give you a sense of what it might sound like. And it goes on. If I play all 2 minutes, you'll have it stuck in your head for the rest of the night. So I know some people here definitely know this song. It's, I think, ingrained in my brain at this point. And it's very, very popular, right? But then it's also interesting to consider how the accordion came over with immigrants from this part of the world to the United States, like in the early 20th century. And then new immigrants to areas started up accordion schools, and then they began to write songs that reflected their new surroundings. So these down here are just 2 examples that I found in my own research of an Italian immigrant who started composing Polish polkas and waltzes after he moved to Northeast Pennsylvania, and he named them after local towns in this new locale where he came to live. So very interesting, lots of conversations that could be had just surrounding that. And these accordion schools maintained popularity with prominent regular advertisements in the local newspapers, right? This newspaper ad is from the late 1950s, right? So they were still very, very popular in the area through, times that weren't so long ago to us, maybe to your students, but still pretty new and fresh. And still today, right, 2025, the accordion is played regularly at local festivals. So I'll play just a short snippet of this audio example I have from my own research. It's by a group called Stanky and the Coal Miners, right? It's a nod to the local coal industry that many Eastern European immigrants worked in, and it's titled "Who Likes Pierogi Polka?"
Who likes pierogi?
Who likes pierogi?
We like pierogi.
With sauerkraut and cheese. Now who likes pierogi?
We like pierogi.
With sauerkraut and cheese. They're so delicious, they're so nutritious. Try some and you will see. Now who likes pierogi?
We like pierogi.
And so I might take him to challenge him on the "they're so nutritious" statement, but pierogi are delicious indeed. And I think it would be very interesting to middle schoolers and maybe even high schoolers to think about all of the things that happen between point A and point B, right? That is like early traditional accordion songs of the region and how we got to polkas about regional foods that are being played in festivals in Pennsylvania in 2025, right? I think that you can actually map the accordion onto almost any corner of the United States, and you can find an active musical tradition that is surrounded by accordion music. So that's a bit of a self-serving diatribe, but I do think that it's very interesting to consider. It is very popular at weddings, this pierogi polka. You might also be surprised to find that there are people in your own local communities who play regional instruments and would be interested in sharing them with your students. If that's not possible, of course, I do like to do this activity where I have them match the sound clip to the instrument and then have discussions based off of that. But we've also done quite a few instrument petting zoos in the local Champaign-Urbana community. I've found that people who have instruments from the region don't often get to talk about them. And so if they have the opportunity to even be in a room with people who are vaguely interested in it, they'll often take you up on it, right? So these are a few photos from, a totally crowdsourced instrument petting zoo that I helped organize at a local library here. It was sort of, I cast a wide net, and the people who were interested in participating brought their instruments along, and it was a loud event for a library, but they invited us, and they were very gracious hosts. Let's see, we had an accordion, we had a Bulgarian bagpipe, a gaida. Of course, they couldn't play it, but they could squeeze the bags and see how the sound is produced on them. And we had an Armenian kanun, so a plucked string instrument. And of course, the drums were there, and they were big and loud hits as well. So middle schoolers really, and younger children as well, younger learners, they really do like to engage with the instruments. I think this is fun for middle schoolers in particular because they're often becoming more engaged with band in middle school, right? They're starting their instrument journey, perhaps. And so like at this event, we did have a few new piano students who were very interested in the accordion and tried to play things like Twinkle Twinkle or a Happy Birthday or something of this nature. And even some guitarists who enjoyed playing my Macedonian tambura. And who doesn't love trying to play a rhythm on a drum, right? So the instrument petting zoo, dealing with instruments, engaging with them up close is always a big hit. All right, so for high school, a few things that I've incorporated into my own high school teaching, and I've spoken with people who have found that this is useful to them. I find that there are many different examples, case studies, if you will, that work quite well within the high school setting. So one unit that I've seen people use and find pretty useful is talking about music and peaceful revolution in the region, right? So perhaps you've heard of the singing revolution that unfolded throughout the Baltics in the late 80s, early 90s, right? This was mass singing as nonviolent resistance throughout Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And at times, hundreds of thousands of people gathered to sing songs that had been banned, right? So hymns, folk songs, anthems, and music became a very strong political tool that unified and helped propel identity during a very uncertain time. And so I think that it's it's interesting for high school students to take this as a case study and then to apply it even to what they see happening in the world today, right? They could see how singing can function as a political action. They could maybe grapple with why traditional songs could be considered dangerous by those in power, right? They can think about what makes a song dangerous and or unifying, right? All at the same time. And I will say that there are some great documentaries out there about the singing revolution. So, do check them out. I'm happy to share resources after the fact as well. It's a very interesting case study to consider. Another thing that I found high schoolers to be very interested in is looking at fusion and globalization in this region of the world as it pertains to music. So here we can think about what happens when more traditional musics, the things that we've heard before, meet a more global sound, right? So things like EDM or hip hop or indie rock even. Groups like Daka Bracha have just really done a lot of very intentional, interesting blurring of genre lines, and it really invites a lot of very interesting conversation about identity and the fluidity of it. For students, I think this is a great space for them to talk about collective hybridity or cultural hybridity, what makes music authentic, who decides what that authenticity is driven by, and how do we think about globalization and how it reshapes how we understand tradition, right? So just to give your ears a chance to hear what we're talking about here, here's just a short clip from a Dacha Bracha performance. You an idea, right? There's a lot of different fusing of like jazz and reggae and traditional music, and it really does. Yes, if you ever get to see them live, it's fantastic. They do a few performances up in Chicago every year or so, so I've been able to see them. Subscribe to their newsletter, because if they're ever in a town near you, you should check them out. I'll give you one other example, and I'll just be careful here because I did actually do my master's research on this group and another Bosnian group. So if I say too much, it'll all be over for us. You'll be beholden to a very long diatribe. But I think another great example of fusion in contemporary music is Dubiosa Collective, which is a wildly popular band that has garnered, I mean, really international interest. And they're from Bosnia, and their sound pulls from everywhere, really. I think there's Balkan rhythms and brass lines, there's punk and ska influence, there's hip hop, there's electronic beats, and it all comes together. It converges into something that feels both totally local and totally global. And this song, USA, it's become very popular by them. And it's especially interesting for the high school classroom, I think, because, well, it's in English, so that does help. And it also does play with this idea of American cultural dominance and questions of immigration and globalization and dream versus reality tension that a lot of young people are feeling and experiencing today. I'll play just a short snippet for you so you can hear what they're singing and what it sounds like.
I'm from Bosnia, take me to America. I really want to see Statue of Liberty. I can no longer wait, take me to United States. Take me to Golden Gate, I will assimilate. The grass is always greener in neighbor's courtyard. I wish to leave this nightmare, go to the promised land. Please take me to your leader, I want my green card. I want to fly over like a rocket from the Balkans.
I want to start all over and turn a new page. Forget this dreadful story, escape the stone age. Waiting for a chance to get out of the cage. I feel like a slave on a minimum wage.
I'm from Bosnia, take me to America. I really want to see Statue of Liberty. I can no longer wait, take me to United States. Take me to Golden Gate, I will assimilate.
So yes, it's satirical, right? But it's a commentary on so many things, right? It touches on what it means to live in a small post-socialist country that's deeply affected by American media and politics and economics. But it's also interesting that it's in English, right? So who's the audience, right? I think that this is a very interesting question for high schoolers to grapple with. And it's a perfect clip for talking about how global pop culture shapes local identities, how artists respond to globalization questions with critique and humor, and how fusion isn't always just about sound, right? But it's also about the message. And, you know, in thinking about the use of English language in this music, this group has become very popular in Western Europe, right? So they have a huge listenership in places like Germany and Austria and France. And what does that mean, right? What can we talk about here and think about English language songs from non-English speaking regions and how this reflects shifting cultural powers? And I think that, you know, high schoolers especially, they catch onto this, they latch onto it quickly because it sounds modern, it's funny, it opens up the door to conversations about stereotypes, about cultural perceptions, and about globalization and global citizenship. So very interesting example. You're almost through hearing me talk, I promise. So for high school, I also have discussed a lot of other different sorts of creative projects with other educators who have tried implementing music into their classrooms, just to give you a sense of what sorts of projects or assignments you might consider, right? So these examples map onto a variety of different subject matters. Even the examples from earlier on in this presentation, they could be used in this context as well. So just for example, students can record a short podcast or create a visual collage of a musical tradition or map how an instrument or a song has traveled across borders. Maybe they are interested in writing a character monologue that's inspired by a folk narrative. A history teacher might have students soundtrack a specific historical moment, right? To think about what that sonic world might sound like in historical context. An ELA teacher might treat a song like a poem and invite students to engage with it and dissect it in that manner. A geography teacher might trace migration routes through sound. Right, none of this requires significant musical training, right? It just requires curiosity. The goal, I think, is to give students multiple ways to explore any given question, right? So they have maybe a new vehicle through which to explore cultural identity, storytelling, even heritage through music. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, music is this incredibly flexible teaching tool, right? It gives us a way to think about connections across different curriculums. So it gives geography teachers, for example, a way to explore landscape and migration and movement. It supports history teachers in thinking about big questions, big picture ideas about empire, conflict, labor, protest, nationalism. Supports literature teachers in analyzing narrative or symbolism. And I think, you know, obviously it ties beautifully into art and dance and religion, and even STEM, right? I think that there are opportunities here to think about physics and acoustics, and there are some pretty funky patterns that happen in complex meters that can teach fractions and patterns very well, right? So I think that you can really sort of, it's a choose your own adventure sort of thing where you can really use it as a tool to help you in whatever you're trying to teach. So I wanted to show you, and I think, Sandra, will there be an easy way for me to share this with everyone after the fact?
I can send out, would you like to share just links or your PowerPoint?
I can share the whole PowerPoint with you if you can get it to the people who are
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can send it to everyone who attended. Absolutely.
Perfect. So you'll have access to all of the YouTube links and all of the resource links
I
as
can
well.
also link it once the video is posted. I can link it underneath the video as the
Perfect.
resource, so it will be permanently there. Yeah.
Great. So one resource that I wanted to show you for sure is the Smithsonian Folkways online resources. So I've linked this directly to their lesson plans on Europe, but they have, I mean, anything and everything that you can imagine. Maybe it didn't take us right to Europe, but that's okay. Here we go. So they have an entire resource on polka or Romani music. They have one on Latvia. They have one on Kolo, on doing circle dances from Yugoslavia, from Russia with Love, right? So this is a fabulous resource for educators. They also do have a lot of audio clips. So if you're interested in doing a deep dive on any specific musical practices, then Smithsonian Folkways is really a great starting point. There is this musical instruments museum in Phoenix, Arizona, that has some really great lesson plans. These are pretty broad, more generally speaking, but they do give you, I think, a good idea of how to incorporate this into early childhood, elementary school, middle and high school. They have a whole lesson plan archive on their website. And they also have extensive YouTube playlists that are very fun, right? So they go through all of their galleries, they do museum curator tours, they do instrument demonstrations that are pretty helpful. So, you know, if you don't have a gusla player in your community, perhaps you can find a video of someone demonstrating it through an official channel like the museum, Musical Instrument Museum. I'm sure perhaps you've spent some time on the UNESCO site of intangible cultural heritage. This can be very overwhelming if you're just sort of looking through it. It goes through, I think, anything possible you can imagine in the entire world, but it is an incredible resource to peruse if you're just looking for ideas, seeds to plant, things that you're interested in. It's a great starting point. And you really don't underestimate what you can find on YouTube for free that's available to you. I think, there are entire playlists of Georgian polyphony and Balkan brass festivals and throat singing. Of course, yes, you have to vet for quality and think about the context, but I do find, curated playlists on YouTube are a great resource as well. A bit more mature, but for my high school teachers out there, I did want to plug this resource that we do have. It's open access at Illinois through our Source Lab project. And this is an incredible resource on music and protest through the Russian group Pussy Riot. And it goes through 6 of their early songs. It gives you incredible background information about the group. I didn't talk about it in my own presentation because it's not really my wheelhouse, but it is very interesting and very topical. And one thing that it does particularly well is it goes through 6 of their early songs. It gives a lot of annotated background information, and then there are annotated lyrics translated into English with almost line by line, very detailed notes about what they're referencing in their protest songs. So I think that's also a very interesting potential music and protest resource if you are interested. So I will stop talking now, and I want to turn it over to you and sort of have you reflect upon everything that we've discussed and think about what maybe one idea is that you are thinking of taking back to your classroom.
Thank you, Danielle. Maybe